Marcus Thornfield woke up every morning at 5:30. He did not need an alarm clock. His body was trained like a machine. By 6, he was already in his home gym, running on the treadmill while reading market reports on his phone. The numbers danced across the screen. Stock prices, profit margins, growth percentages. These numbers made him happy in a way that nothing else could. His mansion in Beverly Hills was worth $12 million. It had 15 bedrooms, but Marcus only used one. He had 8 cars in his garage, but he only drove the black Tesla to work. The other cars were just investments. Everything in Marcus's life was an investment. At 7 sharp, Marcus sat down at his marble dining table. The table was so big it could seat 20 people. But most mornings it was just him. His wife Sarah usually slept until 9. His 12-year-old son David was always rushing to catch the school bus. Marcus ate his breakfast while checking emails. 47 new messages since last night. Each one was about money, deals, or problems that needed fixing. Marcus owned Thornfield Industries. The company made software for hotels and restaurants. It was worth $3.2 billion. He also owned pieces of other companies. Tech startups in Silicon Valley, luxury hotels in Miami and New York, shopping centers in Texas, office buildings in Chicago, real estate in London and Tokyo. When people asked Marcus what he did for work, he said he made money grow. The drive to his office took 30 minutes in Los Angeles traffic. Marcus used every minute. He made phone calls to New York, London, and Hong Kong. Time zones meant nothing to him. While other people slept, Marcus was making deals. His assistant Jennifer had learned to schedule meetings starting at 7 in the morning. Marcus did not believe in wasting time. His office was on the 40th floor of a glass building downtown. From his desk, he could see the whole city spread out below him. The view reminded him every day that he was above everyone else. He had climbed higher than most people ever would. The office walls were covered with awards and photos. Marcus shaking hands with senators. Marcus at charity dinners. Marcus giving speeches about success. But the photos did not show the full story. They did not show Marcus working 18 hours a day. They did not show him missing David's soccer games because of emergency board meetings. They did not show him eating dinner alone at his desk while his family ate at home without him. Marcus believed in one simple rule. Work came first. Everything else came second. Family dinners could be rescheduled. Vacations could be postponed. School plays could be missed. But business deals had deadlines. Stock prices changed every second. Competitors never slept. If Marcus took his eye off the ball for even one day, someone else would take his place. His phone rang constantly. Investors wanted updates. Lawyers needed signatures. Managers had problems to solve. Marcus handled each call with the same cold efficiency. He spoke in numbers and deadlines. He did not waste words on small talk or politeness. Time was money, and Marcus never wasted either. At lunch, Marcus met with 3 potential investors for his latest project. They wanted to build a chain of smart hotels that could run themselves with artificial intelligence. The robots would check in guests. The computers would clean the rooms. The apps would order room service. It would cut costs by 60% and increase profits by 40%. The investors loved the numbers. Marcus loved them too. The afternoon brought more meetings. A conference call with his team in London about buying a hotel chain in Germany. A video meeting with programmers in India who were building new software. A face-to-face meeting with lawyers about a lawsuit from a competitor who claimed Marcus had stolen their ideas. Marcus did not steal ideas. He just had better ones. By 6 o'clock, most of his employees had gone home. Their desks were empty. Their computers were turned off. But Marcus was still working. He reviewed contracts until his eyes hurt. He studied financial reports until the numbers blurred together. He made plans for tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. He was always thinking about the future. The future was where the money was. Sarah called him at 8. David has a school concert tonight. Are you coming? Marcus looked at his calendar. He had a dinner meeting with clients from Japan. The meeting could be worth $50 million. The concert would last 2 hours and earn nothing. I can't make it, he told Sarah. This deal is too important. Sarah's silence said everything she could not put into words. Marcus ate dinner with the Japanese clients at the most expensive restaurant in the city. They talked about expanding into Asian markets. They discussed profit margins and growth projections. The meal cost $2,000, but Marcus barely tasted the food. He was thinking about numbers. Always numbers. He got home at 11:30. The house was dark and quiet. Sarah was already asleep. David's room was dark too. On the kitchen counter, Marcus found David's concert program. His son had played violin in the school orchestra. The program had David's name listed with all the other kids. Marcus looked at it for a few seconds, then threw it in the trash. In his study, Marcus worked until 2 in the morning. He reviewed reports from his hotel managers in Miami. Guest satisfaction was up 3%. Revenue was up 7%. These numbers made Marcus smile. Everything could be measured in percentages and dollar signs. Everything could be improved with the right strategy. When Marcus finally went to bed, he set his phone on the nightstand. Even while sleeping, he was connected to his empire. If something went wrong in London or Tokyo, he would know within minutes. His business never slept, so neither did he. Not really. Marcus dreamed about numbers. Stock prices climbing higher and higher. Profit margins growing bigger and bigger. Bank accounts filling up with more and more money. In his dreams, he was the richest man in the world. Everyone looked up to him. Everyone wanted to be like him. Everyone knew his name. But when Marcus woke up at 5:30 the next morning, he was alone in his big empty house. His empire was worth billions of dollars, but he was still alone. Sarah had been asking for months. Every dinner, every weekend, every quiet moment between them, she would bring up the same thing. "We need a family vacation, Marcus. David is growing up. We're missing everything." Marcus always had the same answer. The Tokyo deal was not finished. The Miami hotels needed his attention. The stock price was dropping. There was always something more important than a vacation. But Sarah did not give up. She booked the trip to Aspen without asking. She bought the plane tickets. She reserved the ski lodge. She packed the bags. When she showed Marcus the tickets on a Tuesday morning, he was angry. "I have meetings all week," he said. "Cancel it." Sarah looked at him with tired eyes. "David has been looking forward to this for 2 months. We're going." The flight to Aspen was quiet. David sat by the window watching the clouds below. Sarah read a book. Marcus worked on his laptop the entire time. Even at 30,000 feet in the air, he could not stop thinking about business. His phone buzzed with messages every few minutes. Updates from his office. Problems that needed solving. Money that needed making. The ski lodge was beautiful. It sat on a snowy mountain with views that went on forever. The rooms were warm and cozy. The fireplace crackled with orange flames. It was the kind of place where families came to be happy together. But Marcus spent the first day in his room on conference calls with his team in London. David was excited about skiing. He had taken lessons the year before, but this was his first time on a real mountain. At 12 years old, David was brave and curious. He wanted to explore everything. He wanted to try the harder slopes. He wanted to go faster and higher. Sarah warned him to be careful. Marcus was too busy on his phone to notice. The second day was better. Marcus actually joined his family for breakfast. They sat together at a table by the window. Snow was falling outside like tiny white stars. David talked about the ski runs he wanted to try. Sarah smiled more than she had in months. For a few minutes, Marcus forgot about his empire. He was just a father sitting with his family. But the feeling did not last long. After breakfast, Marcus's phone rang. It was an emergency. The German hotel deal was falling apart. The investors were pulling out. Marcus needed to fly to Berlin immediately. "I have to go," he told Sarah. She stared at him with disbelief. "We just got here yesterday." Marcus was already standing up. "This deal is worth $200 million. I'll be back tomorrow." Sarah's face turned red with anger. "David has been planning this trip for months. You promised you would spend time with us." Marcus felt trapped between his business and his family. The business always won. "I'm sorry," he said, but he did not sound sorry. He sounded frustrated that they did not understand how important this was. David had been listening to his parents argue. His face was sad and disappointed. "It's okay, Dad," he said quietly. "I understand." But Marcus could see that David did not understand. How could a 12-year-old boy understand that sometimes business had to come first? How could anyone understand the pressure Marcus felt every day to keep his empire growing? Marcus went upstairs to pack his bags. While he was throwing clothes into his suitcase, he could hear Sarah and David talking downstairs. Sarah was trying to make David feel better. "We'll have fun without Dad," she said. We can ski together and drink hot chocolate." David said he was fine, but his voice sounded small and hurt. Something stopped Marcus from leaving. Maybe it was the look on David's face. Maybe it was the disappointment in Sarah's voice. Or maybe he was just tired of always choosing work over family. Marcus came back downstairs with his suitcase in his hand. Sarah and David looked at him, waiting for him to say goodbye. "I'm staying," Marcus said. Sarah's eyes went wide with surprise. "What about the German deal?" Marcus set down his suitcase. "My team can handle it. I have good people working for me." David smiled for the first time all day. It was a real smile, bright and happy. Marcus had forgotten how good it felt to make his son smile. The third day started perfectly. The sun was shining. The snow was fresh and powdery. The three of them went to the slopes together. Marcus was not a good skier, but he tried his best. David was much better than his father. The boy flew down the mountain like he was born on skis. Sarah laughed as she watched Marcus fall down twice trying to keep up with their son. They ate lunch together at a restaurant on the mountain. David talked about wanting to try the advanced slopes. Marcus and Sarah both said no. "Those slopes are for expert skiers," Sarah explained. "You're not ready yet." David argued that he was a good skier. He had been practicing for a year. He could handle it. But his parents were firm. Advanced slopes were dangerous. After lunch, Marcus got a phone call he could not ignore. The CEO of his biggest competitor was trying to buy one of Marcus's companies. It was a hostile takeover attempt. Marcus needed to handle it immediately. "Give me 30 minutes, he told Sarah and David. "I'll meet you back here." He found a quiet corner of the restaurant and started making calls. The 30 minutes turned into an hour. Marcus was fighting to save his company. He was making deals and threats over the phone. He was doing what he did best, protecting his empire. While he talked to lawyers and investors, he forgot about everything else. He forgot about the mountain. He forgot about the vacation. He forgot about David. David got bored waiting for his father. He could see the advanced slopes from the restaurant window. They looked exciting and challenging. Other kids his age were skiing down them. Why couldn't he try just one run? Sarah was inside talking to Marcus about his phone call. David could hear them arguing about business again. The boy made a decision that would change everything. He put on his skis and headed toward the advanced slope called Eagle's Peak. It was the steepest run on the mountain. The snow was icy and fast. David thought he could handle it. He was young and confident. He did not think about the dangers. At first, David felt amazing. He was flying down the mountain faster than ever before. The wind was rushing past his face. The trees were blurring by. He felt free and powerful. For a few seconds, he felt like he could do anything. Then everything went wrong. David hit a patch of ice and lost control. His skis crossed over each other. He started tumbling down the slope. He tried to stop himself, but he was going too fast. A large pine tree was coming up fast. David saw it and tried to turn away. But it was too late. The impact was terrible. David hit the tree with a sound that echoed across the mountain. His body crumpled against the trunk. His skis flew off in different directions. For a moment, everything was silent. Then people started screaming. Sarah heard the screams from inside the restaurant. She ran outside and saw a crowd gathering around the bottom of Eagle's Peak. A sick feeling filled her stomach. She knew something terrible had happened. She ran toward the crowd, her heart beating so fast she could barely breathe. Marcus was still on his phone when Sarah started screaming, "David, oh God, David!" Marcus dropped the phone and ran outside. He saw his wife pushing through a crowd of people. He saw ski patrol members with a stretcher. He saw his son lying motionless in the snow. The world stopped. All the phone calls, all the deals, all the money. None of it mattered anymore. Marcus ran to his son as fast as he could. David's eyes were closed. His face was white as the snow around him. There was blood on his jacket. The ski patrol was checking his pulse and asking him questions he could not answer. "Is he breathing?" Sarah cried. "Please tell me he's breathing." The paramedic nodded. "He's alive, but we need to get him to the hospital right now." They lifted David onto the stretcher carefully. His body was limp like a broken doll. The helicopter ride to the hospital was the longest 20 minutes of Marcus's life. He held Sarah's hand and watched his son's chest rise and fall with each breath. David's face was so pale and still. Marcus prayed to a God he had not talked to in 20 years. He promised everything. His money, his company, his life. Anything to make his son okay again. At the hospital, doctors rushed David into surgery. Marcus and Sarah sat in the waiting room for 6 hours. Marcus did not check his phone once. He did not care about the German deal or the hostile takeover. He did not care about anything except his son. For the first time in his adult life, money could not fix the problem. Money could not take back what happened on that mountain. When the doctor finally came out to talk to them, his face was serious and sad. Marcus knew before the man said a word that their lives had changed forever. The accident had damaged David's spinal cord. The injury was severe and permanent. David would never walk again. Marcus felt like he was drowning. The room started spinning. All the air left his lungs. His son, his brave, wonderful son, would spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. And it was all Marcus's fault. If he had not been on that phone call, David would not have been alone. If he had been watching his son instead of protecting his business, none of this would have happened. The empire Marcus had built suddenly felt like a prison. All the success in the world could not give his son back the use of his legs. Marcus threw money at the problem like water on a fire. He hired the best doctors from around the world. Dr. Hamilton from Johns Hopkins, Dr. Chen from Tokyo, Dr. Muller from Switzerland. Each one cost more than most people made in a year, but Marcus did not care about the cost. He would spend every dollar he had to fix his son. The doctors all said the same thing in different words. David's spinal cord was badly damaged. The injury was at the T12 level, which meant he had no feeling or movement below his waist. Some doctors offered hope. New treatments were being developed. Stem cell therapy might help. Experimental surgeries could be tried. But they all agreed on one thing. David would probably never walk normally again. Marcus refused to accept this answer. He had never accepted failure in business, and he would not accept it now. He flew David to the best hospitals in America. They tried steroid treatments to reduce swelling. They tried electrical stimulation to wake up the damaged nerves. They tried experimental drugs that had only been tested on animals. Nothing worked. While the doctors worked on David's body, Marcus worked on changing their house. He hired contractors to build ramps instead of stairs. He installed elevators and widened doorways. He bought the most expensive wheelchair money could buy. It was made of titanium and cost $40,000. David's new bedroom was on the first floor with a private bathroom designed for wheelchairs. Everything was perfect except for one thing. David hated it all. The boy who used to run everywhere now sat still all day. David would stare out the window for hours without saying a word. When physical therapists came to help him learn to use his wheelchair, he would not cooperate. "What's the point?" he would ask. "I'll never be normal again." The therapists tried to stay positive, but David's sadness was stronger than their cheerfulness. Sarah tried everything to help her son. She read him books and played his favorite movies. She invited his friends over, but David did not want to see them. He was embarrassed about his wheelchair. He was angry about his life. He was sad about his future. 12-year-old boys should be playing soccer and riding bikes, not sitting in wheelchairs learning how to transfer from bed to chair. Marcus watched his son disappear a little more each day. The happy, brave boy who had wanted to ski down the mountain was gone. In his place was a quiet, angry child who barely spoke to anyone. David especially did not want to talk to his father. When Marcus tried to visit David's room, the boy would turn away and pretend to sleep. "He blames me," Marcus told Sarah one night. They were sitting in their living room after David had gone to bed. Sarah was crying again. She cried every night now. "He should blame me," Marcus continued. "This is my fault. I was on the phone instead of watching him." Sarah looked at her husband with tired eyes. "We both made mistakes," she said. "But blaming yourself won't help David now. He needs us to be strong for him." But Marcus did not feel strong. For the first time in his life, he felt completely powerless. All his money and success meant nothing when his son would not even look at him. The expensive private nurses came and went like revolving doors. Mrs. Peterson was too strict. She treated David like a patient instead of a person. Mr. Johnson was too cheerful. His constant positive attitude annoyed David. Ms. Williams was too clinical. She spoke in medical terms that made everyone feel like they were in a hospital instead of a home. Each nurse lasted a few weeks before David refused to work with them anymore. He would complain that they did not understand him. They were just doing their jobs, collecting their paychecks and going home to their normal lives. David did not want their pity or their professional kindness. He wanted his old life back, and since he could not have that, he wanted to be left alone. Marcus began working from home so he could be close to David. He set up an office in the room next to his son's bedroom. But working from home was torture. Marcus could hear David crying at night. He could hear the silence during the day when David would not talk to anyone. He could hear the physical therapist trying to encourage a boy who had given up hope. The business calls continued, but Marcus's heart was not in them anymore. His assistant Jennifer would call with updates about deals and meetings. His managers would report on profits and losses. His lawyers would explain new contracts and lawsuits. Marcus listened and gave orders, but everything felt meaningless. What good was making money when his son was suffering? Sarah started blaming Marcus for the accident. She never said it directly, but Marcus could see it in her eyes. If he had not taken that phone call, David would not have been alone. If he had been a better father, David would not have felt the need to prove himself on that dangerous slope. If Marcus had put his family first instead of his business, none of this would have happened. The guilt ate at Marcus like a disease. He could not sleep at night. When he did sleep, he had nightmares about the accident. He would see David flying down the mountain over and over again. He would hear the sound of his son hitting the tree. He would wake up in a cold sweat, hoping it was all a bad dream. But David's wheelchair in the hallway reminded him that the nightmare was real. Marcus tried to talk to David many times. He would knock on his son's door and ask if he could come in. Sometimes David said yes, but he never looked at his father. He would stare at the ceiling or out the window while Marcus talked. Marcus would tell him about the new doctors they were going to see. He would explain the experimental treatments they could try. He would promise that everything would get better. "I don't want to get better," David said one day. It was the first time he had spoken directly to his father in weeks. "I want to be normal. I want to walk and run and play soccer. But I can't, and no amount of money will change that." Marcus felt like his son had punched him in the chest. The words hurt because they were true. The experimental treatments continued for months. They tried a new surgery to implant electrodes near David's spinal cord. The operation took 8 hours and cost $200,000. For a week, Marcus hoped it might work, but David still could not move his legs. They tried stem cell injections that cost $50,000 per treatment. David had to get shots every day for a month. The side effects made him sick, but his legs remained lifeless. Each failed treatment made David more hopeless and made Marcus more desperate. The doctors began suggesting that the family focus on adaptation instead of cure. They recommended accepting the wheelchair and learning to live with the disability. Marcus refused to give up. There had to be something that would work. There had to be a doctor somewhere who could fix his son. The house became a sad and quiet place. Sarah stopped cooking family dinners because David would not come to the table. Marcus stopped having business meetings at home because David's crying would interrupt the calls. The three of them lived in the same house but felt like strangers. The accident had broken more than David's back. It had broken their family. Marcus's business empire continued to grow even while his personal life fell apart. His companies made record profits. His stock prices reached new highs. His net worth increased by millions every month. But none of it mattered. Success felt hollow when his son was in pain. Money felt worthless when it could not buy his family's happiness. Late at night, Marcus would walk through his empty mansion and think about his life. He had everything he thought he wanted: wealth, power, respect, success. But his son barely spoke to him. His wife blamed him for their tragedy. His family was broken and no amount of money could fix it. The worst part was the silence. David used to fill the house with noise, laughing, playing music, talking on the phone with friends, practicing violin. Now the house was as quiet as a tomb. The boy who had been so full of life was disappearing into sadness, and Marcus did not know how to bring him back. Marcus had conquered every business challenge he had ever faced. He had built an empire from nothing. He had defeated competitors and won impossible deals. But he could not figure out how to help his own son. For the first time in his life, Marcus Thornfield felt like a complete failure. After 6 months of failed nurses and broken promises, Sarah decided to try something different. She found Maria Santos through a friend who worked at a local rehabilitation center. Maria was not like the other nurses Marcus had hired. She did not have degrees from fancy medical schools. She had not worked with rich families before. But she had something the expensive nurses lacked. She actually cared about helping kids like David. Marcus was not happy when Sarah told him about Maria. "We need someone with better credentials," he said, looking at Maria's resume. "She only has 5 years of experience. Dr. Hamilton recommended someone from his team who has worked with spinal cord injuries for 20 years. Sarah was tired of arguing with her husband about everything. "The fancy nurses haven't helped David at all," she said. "Maybe we need to try someone different." Maria Santos was 34 years old and had grown up in East Los Angeles. Her family had never had much money, but they had something more valuable. They had love and hope and joy even during hard times. Maria's younger brother had been born with cerebral palsy, so she understood what it felt like to watch someone you love struggle with disability. She became a nurse because she wanted to help families like hers. When Maria first came to the Thornfield mansion, she was amazed by how big and fancy it was. The house was bigger than the entire apartment building where she had grown up. The furniture cost more than her car. The artwork on the walls was worth more than she made in 10 years. But Maria was not intimidated. Rich or poor, a hurt kid was still a hurt kid. Marcus met Maria at the front door. He was wearing an expensive suit and looking at his watch impatiently. Maria was wearing simple scrubs and carrying a worn backpack instead of a professional briefcase. "I'm Maria Santos," she said with a warm smile. "I'm here to meet David." Marcus shook her hand briefly and led her inside without making conversation. David's room was dark when they walked in. The boy was lying in bed staring at the ceiling. He did not look at Maria when she entered. This was normal. Most of the other nurses had gotten the same cold treatment. But Maria did something different. Instead of introducing herself in a professional voice, she sat down in the chair next to David's bed and started talking like they were old friends. "Hey there," Maria said in Spanish, then switched to English. "My name is Maria, but most people call me Mari. I hear you've been giving all the fancy nurses a hard time. Good for you. I never like stuck-up people either." David turned his head slightly to look at this strange new person who was talking to him like a real human being instead of a patient. "I brought my guitar," Maria continued, pulling an old acoustic guitar out of her backpack. "I know it's kind of weird, but music helps me think. Do you like music?" David nodded slowly. It was the first time he had responded to any nurse in weeks. Maria smiled and started playing a simple song. She had a nice voice, not professional, but warm and honest. Marcus watched from the doorway, frowning. This was not how medical professionals were supposed to behave. Nurses should be discussing treatment plans and medication schedules, not playing guitar and making jokes. But David was actually looking at Maria instead of staring at the ceiling. That was more progress than they had seen in months. Over the next few days, Maria did things that shocked Marcus. Instead of focusing only on David's physical therapy, she talked to him about movies and books and music. She brought him pictures of her nephew who was the same age as David. She told him funny stories about her family. She treated David like a normal kid who happened to be in a wheelchair instead of a tragedy that needed to be fixed. Maria also did things differently when it came to medical care. The other nurses had been very serious about following exact schedules for everything. Physical therapy at 10, medication at 2, bathroom breaks at specific times. Maria was more flexible. If David was having a good day, she would push him to do more exercises. If he was feeling sad, she would sit with him and let him talk about his feelings. "This is not professional," Marcus told Sarah after watching Maria work for a week. "She's too casual. She's not following the treatment plan Dr. Hamilton created. She spends more time talking than doing therapy." Sarah looked at her husband with frustration. "David is talking to her," she said. "He's actually participating in his care. Isn't that what matters?" But Marcus was used to controlling everything in his life. He wanted detailed reports about David's progress. He wanted charts and graphs showing improvement. He wanted measurable results that proved the money he was spending was working. Maria's approach was too unpredictable for Marcus's business-trained mind. Maria could see that Marcus did not trust her. She had worked with difficult parents before, usually mothers who were overprotective and fathers who thought money could solve everything. But Marcus was different. His worry about his son was mixed with guilt and fear, and a desperate need to control things he could not control. One afternoon, Maria asked Marcus to sit down and talk with her. They were in the living room while David was napping. "Mr. Thornfield," she said, "I can see that you love your son very much. But I think you're making his recovery harder by trying to force it to happen. Marcus was offended. Nobody talked to him like this, especially not an employee he was paying. I've hired the best doctors in the world, Marcus said coldly. I've spent millions of dollars on treatments. I've done everything possible to help David. Maria nodded. You've done everything possible to fix David's body, she said. But what about his heart? What about his spirit? Your son is not just a broken spine that needs to be repaired. He's a scared 12-year-old boy who thinks his life is over. Marcus did not like being lectured by someone he considered beneath him professionally. What do you suggest? He asked in a tone that made it clear he did not really want her opinion. Maria was not intimidated by his attitude. She had dealt with wealthy people before who thought their money made them smarter than everyone else. I suggest you let me do my job, Maria said firmly. Stop watching every therapy session like you're supervising a business meeting. Stop asking for progress reports every day. Stop treating David's recovery like a project that needs to be managed. Let me help your son remember how to be happy again. This conversation made Marcus angry. He was used to being in charge of everything. He was used to employees who followed his orders without question. Maria was challenging his authority in his own house. But Sarah supported Maria's approach. Give her a chance, Sarah begged. David is actually smiling sometimes. That's more than we've seen in months. Reluctantly, Marcus agreed to step back and let Maria work without interference. But he watched from a distance, waiting for her to fail like all the others. He was sure that her casual approach would not produce real results. Recovery required discipline and professional expertise, not guitar songs and friendly conversations. Marcus was wrong. Under Maria's care, David began to change in ways that no expensive treatment had achieved. He started getting out of bed without being forced to. He began eating meals instead of picking at his food. He laughed at Maria's jokes and asked her questions about her family. Most importantly, he started trying harder during physical therapy because he did not want to disappoint someone who believed in him. Maria had a gift for seeing the person inside the disability. She did not treat David like a victim or a broken thing that needed fixing. She treated him like a young man with dreams and potential who had hit a temporary roadblock. This made David feel hope for the first time since his accident. But Maria's success made Marcus feel even more guilty. A nurse who made $30 an hour was helping his son more than doctors who charged thousands of dollars per visit. Maria's kindness and understanding were more powerful than all the expensive medical equipment Marcus had bought. This made Marcus question everything he thought he knew about solving problems with money. Marcus began watching Maria work with new eyes. He saw how she encouraged David to push himself without making him feel like a failure when he could not do something. He saw how she celebrated small victories that Marcus had overlooked. He saw how she made David laugh during painful exercises by telling stories or singing silly songs. Most importantly, Marcus saw something he had been missing for months. His son was starting to hope again. David was still paralyzed. He was still in a wheelchair, but he was no longer disappearing into sadness. Maria had reminded him that life could still be good, even if it was different than he had planned. Marcus did not understand how Maria's simple approach could work when sophisticated medical treatments had failed. But he could not argue with the results. His son was coming back to life, and it was because of a nurse who brought a guitar to work and treated patients like family members instead of case studies. The first real fight between Marcus and Maria happened on a Tuesday morning in November. Marcus came home from a business meeting to find David's room empty. His wheelchair was gone too. Panic filled Marcus's chest as he searched the house. Where was his son? Where was the nurse he was paying to keep David safe? Marcus found Sarah in the kitchen making lunch. "Where's David?" he demanded. Sarah looked up from her sandwich preparation calmly. "He's at the community center with Maria. They go there twice a week for adaptive sports." Marcus felt his face turn red with anger. "What community center? I never approved this. Why wasn't I told?" Sarah set down her knife and looked at her husband with tired eyes. "Maria told us about it last week at dinner. You were on your phone the whole time, as usual. David wanted to try it, and I said yes." Marcus could not believe what he was hearing. His son was out somewhere without his permission, doing activities that had not been approved by doctors. Marcus drove to the community center as fast as he could. It was in a part of town he never visited. Not rich, not poor, just ordinary. Working-class families lived here. The buildings were older and the cars were not fancy. This was not the kind of place where Marcus expected to find his son receiving therapy. The community center was a simple brick building with a gym, some meeting rooms, and a small swimming pool. When Marcus walked inside, he could hear voices and laughter coming from the gym. He followed the sound and found something that shocked him. David was playing basketball from his wheelchair and he was smiling. About 15 kids were in the gym and half of them were in wheelchairs. Some had missing legs. Others had arm injuries. A few had conditions Marcus did not recognize. But they were all playing and laughing and acting like normal kids. Maria was on the court too, cheering everyone on and giving high fives when someone made a good shot. David saw his father standing in the doorway and his smile disappeared. Marcus looked angry and upset, which made David feel embarrassed. The other kids noticed the tension and stopped playing. Maria walked over to Marcus with a calm expression on her face. "Mr. Thornfield," she said politely, "I didn't expect to see you here." Marcus was trying to control his temper because there were children watching. "I need to speak with you outside," he said through gritted teeth. Maria nodded and told the kids to keep playing while she talked to David's father. Outside the gym, Marcus let his anger show. "How dare you bring my son here without my permission? I'm paying you to provide medical care, not to take him on unauthorized field trips. What if he gets hurt? What if something happens to him?" Maria listened patiently while Marcus yelled at her. "David is fine," Maria said when Marcus finally stopped talking. "He's actually better than fine. He's happy. Look at him in there. When was the last time you saw your son smile like that?" Marcus looked through the gym window and saw David laughing as he tried to steal the ball from another kid. It was true. David looked happier than he had in months. But Marcus was still angry about not being consulted. "That's not the point. You work for me. You should have asked for my approval before bringing him here. What are his qualifications? Are these activities medically supervised? Has a doctor cleared David for this level of physical activity?" Maria sighed. She had dealt with overprotective parents before, but Marcus was extreme. "Mr. Thornfield, David has been cleared for physical activity by 3 different doctors. This program is run by certified therapists, and most importantly, being around other kids who understand what he's going through is helping him heal in ways that sitting alone in his room never could." Marcus was not convinced. These other children don't have access to the best medical care. They're not getting experimental treatments. David shouldn't be comparing himself to kids who have accepted their limitations. He needs to focus on recovery, not on adapting to disability. This comment made Maria angry for the first time since she had started working for the Thornfield family. "Those kids in there are not limited," she said firmly. "They're some of the strongest, most determined people I've ever met. They've learned to find joy and purpose despite their challenges. Maybe David could learn something from them." Marcus felt like Maria was questioning his entire approach to his son's care. "I've spent millions of dollars on the best doctors and treatments in the world. That's more important than playing games with other disabled children." The word disabled came out of Marcus's mouth like it was something dirty and shameful. "Your son is disabled," Maria said bluntly. "He's paralyzed from the waist down, and that's not going to change no matter how much money you spend. The question is whether he's going to be a disabled person who lives a full, happy life, or a disabled person who hides in his room feeling sorry for himself." Marcus was shocked that an employee would speak to him so directly. In his business world, no one ever challenged him like this. People agreed with his decisions and followed his orders. But Maria was not backing down. She believed in what she was saying, and she was willing to fight for David's well-being even if it meant losing her job. "I want David to come home immediately," Marcus said, "and from now on all activities must be approved by me in advance. No exceptions." Maria nodded, but Marcus could see the disappointment in her eyes. She went back into the gym to collect David. The ride home was quiet and tense. David sat in the passenger seat of Marcus's car, staring out the window. Marcus wanted to explain why he had been worried, but he did not know how to start the conversation. Finally, David spoke first. "I was having fun," David said quietly. "For the first time since my accident, I forgot about being different. Those kids don't feel sorry for me. They treat me normal." Marcus glanced at his son's sad face in the mirror. "I just want to keep you safe," he said. "Safe from what?" David asked. "Safe from living? Safe from having friends? Safe from being happy?" Marcus did not have a good answer. He had been so focused on protecting David from physical harm that he had not thought about the emotional harm of isolation. When they got home, Marcus called a meeting with Maria and Sarah. He wanted to establish clear rules about David's care. From now on, all activities outside this house must be approved by me 24 hours in advance, he announced. I want detailed schedules and medical supervision reports for everything. Sarah looked at her husband with disbelief. Marcus, David was happy today. Happier than I've seen him in months. Why do you want to take that away from him? Marcus felt like everyone was ganging up on him. I want to keep our son safe and focused on recovery. Maria spoke up carefully. Mr. Thornfield, with respect, recovery isn't just about fixing David's body. It's about helping him build a life he can be proud of. Those kids at the community center are living proof that people with spinal cord injuries can do amazing things. Marcus was getting frustrated. Those children have given up on walking again. I don't want David to give up. I want him to keep trying experimental treatments. I want him to believe that anything is possible. Maria understood Marcus's hope, but she also understood something he did not want to accept. Hope is important, Maria said gently, but false hope can be cruel. David needs to learn how to be happy in a wheelchair, while we also explore medical options. He can do both at the same time. Marcus shook his head. If he accepts the wheelchair, he'll stop trying to walk. I can't let that happen. The battle continued for weeks. Marcus would schedule more medical appointments and experimental treatments. Maria would encourage David to participate in social activities and adaptive sports. David was caught in the middle, torn between his father's dreams of a miracle cure and Maria's vision of a fulfilling life with disability. David began to see the difference between his father's approach and Maria's approach. Marcus looked at him and saw a problem that needed to be solved. Maria looked at him and saw a person with unlimited potential. Marcus focused on what David had lost. Maria focused on what David could still do. The tension in the house grew worse every day. Marcus felt like Maria was undermining his authority and sabotaging David's recovery. Maria felt like Marcus was so focused on curing David that he was missing the chance to help his son learn to live again. Sarah felt like she was caught between her husband's desperation and her son's needs. Everything came to a head when Marcus discovered that Maria had been taking David to visit other families with disabled children. These visits were not on any approved schedule. Maria had been doing them during David's rest time when Marcus thought his son was napping. Marcus was furious. You've been lying to me, he accused Maria. You've been taking my son places without permission and teaching him to accept his disability instead of fighting it. You're fired, Sarah gasped. David, who had been listening from his wheelchair in the hallway, rolled into the room. If Maria goes, I go too, David said firmly. It was the strongest, most determined voice he had used since his accident. She's the only person who treats me like I'm still alive. Everyone else just sees me as broken. Marcus looked at his son in shock. David had never stood up to him like this before. You don't understand, Marcus said desperately. I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to fix this. David looked at his father with sad. 8 months had passed since David's accident. 8 months of doctors and treatments and therapies and fights between Marcus and Maria. 8 months of small improvements and big disappointments. 8 months of a family trying to find their way through the darkness of tragedy. David had grown stronger in many ways during those months. His arms were muscular from using his wheelchair. His hands were tough from gripping the wheels. His spirit was brighter thanks to Maria's encouragement. But his legs remained still and lifeless. No amount of money or hope had brought feeling back to them. Marcus was in his office on a Thursday afternoon, trying to focus on a conference call with investors in London. But his mind kept wandering to David. The experimental treatment they had tried in Switzerland had failed. The stem cell therapy had shown no results. The electrical stimulation had done nothing. Marcus was running out of options, and for the first time, he was starting to wonder if Maria had been right all along. The call was about a new hotel project in Dubai. The investors were excited about profit projections and market analysis. Marcus listened to the numbers and tried to care about millions of dollars and growth percentages, but all he could think about was his son sitting in his wheelchair, practicing transfers from bed to chair for the 100th time. Mr. Thornfield, one of the investors said, "Are you still with us? We need your decision about the financing structure." Marcus realized he had not been listening for several minutes. "I'm sorry," he said. "Can you repeat the question?" This was not like Marcus. He never lost focus during business calls. Money had always been his primary concern. While Marcus was distracted by thoughts of his son, something amazing was happening in David's therapy room. Maria was working with David on a new piece of equipment that had arrived the week before. It was called a standing frame combined with functional electrical stimulation. The machine could make David's muscles contract using small electrical pulses while supporting his body weight. Dr. Peterson, the physical therapist, had explained that the machine might help maintain David's bone density and muscle mass. It could also improve his circulation and give him the psychological benefit of being upright. But no one expected it to restore actual movement. The damage to David's spinal cord was too severe for that kind of miracle. David had been working with the machine for 30 minutes. The electrical stimulation made his leg muscles contract in patterns that looked like walking, but he could not feel anything below his waist. Maria was encouraging him as always, talking about how strong he was getting and how proud she was of his progress. "I wish I could feel something," David said as the machine moved his legs through the walking motion. "Even just a little bit. I would give anything to feel my toes wiggle." Maria understood his frustration. She had worked with many patients who had spinal cord injuries, and the loss of sensation was often harder to accept than the loss of movement. "I know it's hard," Maria said, adjusting the settings on the machine. "But look how strong your legs are staying. Look how straight you can stand. Even if you can't feel them, they're still part of you." David smiled at Maria's eternal optimism. She never let him feel sorry for himself for long. That's when it happened, something that should have been impossible according to every doctor David had seen, something that no one in the room was prepared for. As the electrical stimulation pulsed through David's left leg, his big toe moved. Not from the machine. The machine was not connected to his toes. The movement came from inside David's own body. David stared at his foot in shock. "Did you see that?" he whispered. Maria looked where David was pointing, not sure what he meant. "See what?" she asked. David concentrated as hard as he could, thinking about moving his toe. And slowly, incredibly, it moved again. "Maria," David shouted, his voice filled with excitement and disbelief. "My toe! I moved my toe!" Maria looked at David's foot and saw the tiny movement. It was barely visible, just a small twitch, but it was definitely voluntary movement. After 8 months of complete paralysis, David had moved something below his waist. Maria's eyes filled with tears instantly. In 5 years of working with spinal cord patients, she had never seen anything like this. Partial recovery was possible in some cases, but not after so many months with no improvement. Not with David's type of injury, not according to everything she had been taught. "Do it again," Maria said, her voice shaking with emotion. "Show me you can do it again." David focused all his attention on his left foot. He thought about his toe as hard as he could, and there it was, another small but definite movement. His big toe curled slightly, then straightened. David started crying with joy and amazement. "I can feel it," he said through his tears. "I can actually feel my toe. It's like pins and needles, but I can feel it." Maria was crying too, overwhelmed by witnessing what seemed impossible. She had prayed for David to have some recovery, but she had never really believed it would happen. The commotion in David's therapy room was getting louder as David and Maria celebrated this incredible breakthrough. David was laughing and crying at the same time, moving his toe over and over again just because he could. Maria was calling for Dr. Peterson to come see what was happening. Upstairs in his office, Marcus was still on his conference call with the London investors, trying to focus on hotel profits and construction timelines. The call was dragging on longer than expected. One investor wanted to discuss risk management strategies. Another had questions about the local market competition. "Mr. Thornfield," the lead investor said, "we need your final approval to move forward with the project. Are you ready to commit to the financing?" Marcus was about to answer when he heard something that made him stop talking. David was shouting downstairs, not screaming in pain or anger like Marcus had heard so many times before. This sounding different, David sounded happy. "Gentlemen," Marcus said suddenly, "I need to call you back." He hung up the phone without waiting for a response. The hotel deal in Dubai could wait. Something was happening with his son, and for once Marcus was going to prioritize David over business. Marcus ran downstairs toward David's therapy room. He could hear David's voice getting louder and more excited. He could hear Maria crying and laughing at the same time. He could hear Dr. Peterson saying incredible and impossible over and over again. Marcus's heart was racing as he pushed open the door to see what was happening. The scene in David's therapy room stopped Marcus in his tracks. His son was standing in the support frame with tears of joy streaming down his face. Maria was kneeling beside David's feet, watching something intently. Dr. Peterson was taking notes frantically and calling someone on his phone. "Dad," David shouted when he saw Marcus in the doorway. Look at this." David concentrated on his left foot, and Marcus watched in amazement as his son's big toe moved clearly and deliberately. It was a small movement, barely noticeable, but it was the most beautiful thing Marcus had ever seen. "I can feel it, Dad," David said, his voice full of wonder. "After all these months of nothing, I can actually feel my toe. And I can move it. Watch me do it again." David made his toe move 3 more times while Marcus watched in stunned silence. Marcus felt like his legs were going to give out. 8 months of failed treatments and lost hope. And now his son was moving his toe and feeling sensation in his foot. It was not full recovery, but it was proof that healing was possible. It was proof that miracles could still happen. Maria looked at Marcus with tears in her eyes. She had been fighting with him for months about David's care, but in this moment, none of that mattered. They were both witnessing something extraordinary happening to a boy they loved. "He did it, Mr. Thornfield," she said softly. "David did something impossible." Marcus walked slowly toward his son, hardly believing what he was seeing. David was glowing with happiness and pride. This was the son Marcus remembered from before the accident. Brave and determined and full of hope. For the first time in 8 months, David looked like he believed in his future again. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked his son, his voice barely a whisper. David smiled, the biggest smile Marcus had seen since before the skiing trip. "I feel like maybe everything is going to be okay," David said. "I feel like I'm still me." Marcus reached out and touched his son's face gently. David did not turn away or avoid eye contact like he had been doing for months. Instead, he looked directly at his father with love and forgiveness in his eyes. "I'm proud of you," Marcus said, meaning it more than he had ever meant anything in his life. In that moment, Marcus understood something that had taken him 8 months to learn. His son's worth was not measured by whether he could walk or run or play soccer. David's courage in facing his challenges, his determination to keep trying, his kindness toward other kids with disabilities, these things made him extraordinary with or without working legs. Marcus also understood something else. Maria had been right about almost everything. David needed acceptance and love and community, not just medical treatments and false hope. The breakthrough with his toe was wonderful, but even if it had never happened, David was already a remarkable young man who deserved to be celebrated for who he was. The toe movement was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, David regained feeling in parts of both feet. He could wiggle 3 toes on his left foot and 2 on his right. The sensation was weak and strange, like his feet were waking up after being asleep for months. But it was real feeling, and it gave everyone hope that more recovery might be possible. Marcus's reaction to David's breakthrough surprised everyone, especially himself. Instead of immediately calling more doctors and demanding aggressive new treatments, he did something completely different. He sat down and asked David how he felt about what was happening. He listened to his son's fears and hopes without trying to fix everything or take control of the situation. "I'm scared, Dad," David admitted during one of their conversations. "What if this is all the feeling I get back? What if I never walk normally again?" Marcus felt his old instincts kicking in, the urge to make promises he could not keep, to throw money at the problem, to find experts who would guarantee a full recovery. But something had changed in Marcus during that moment when he saw David move his toe. The sight of Maria's tears of joy and David's expression of pure wonder had broken open something in Marcus's heart. He had cried that day, not from sadness or frustration, but from overwhelming gratitude and love. Those tears had washed away some of the fear and guilt he had been carrying for 8 months. "I don't know what will happen," Marcus told his son honestly, "but I know that whatever happens, we'll face it together, and I know that you're going to have an amazing life no matter what." David looked surprised. His father had never talked to him like this before, without promises of miracle cures or demands to keep. Fighting for complete recovery, Marcus started spending entire days with David instead of rushing back to his office after quick visits. He learned about his son's interests and dreams that had nothing to do with walking again. David was fascinated by environmental science and wanted to help solve climate change. He had ideas about making buildings more energy efficient. He dreamed of starting a company that would help protect the oceans. "I never knew you were interested in the environment," Marcus said as David showed him articles about solar energy and ocean pollution. David smiled. "I've always cared about this stuff, Dad, but you were usually on your phone when I tried to talk about it." Marcus felt a stab of regret. How many conversations had he missed? How many chances to know his son had he wasted while focusing on business calls? Marcus began attending every one of David's therapy sessions, but not as a demanding executive watching for measurable progress. He came as a supportive father who wanted to understand what his son was going through. He watched Maria work with David and saw how her encouragement and belief in him helped David push through difficult exercises. "I owe you an apology," Marcus told Maria one afternoon after a therapy session. "You were right about David needing acceptance and community. You were right about letting him make his own choices. I was so afraid of losing him that I almost lost him in a different way." Maria smiled gently. She had never doubted that Marcus loved his son, even when they disagreed about everything. "You were scared," Maria said. "When someone you love gets hurt, fear makes us do crazy things. But you're learning, and that's what matters." Marcus was grateful for Maria's forgiveness, but he knew he still had work to do to rebuild his relationship with David. The change in Marcus went deeper than just his approach to David's care. He started looking at his business empire differently, too. The hotels and office buildings and stock portfolios that had once consumed all his attention now seemed less important than spending time with his family. He began delegating more responsibilities to his managers and refusing to take calls during family time. Sarah noticed the change in her husband immediately. Marcus had been emotionally distant for years, even before David's accident. Work had always come first, family second. But now Marcus was asking about her day and listening to her answers. He was helping with household decisions instead of leaving everything to her. He was present in ways he had not been since the early years of their marriage. "What happened to you in that therapy room?" Sarah asked Marcus one evening. They were sitting together on the couch, something they had not done in months. David was upstairs doing homework, and the house was peaceful for once. "I saw my son's face when he moved his toe," Marcus said. "And I saw how happy Maria was for him. I realized I had been so focused on fixing David that I forgot to just love him." Marcus also began to see Maria not as an employee, but as the guardian angel who had saved his family. She had refused to give up on David when expensive doctors had offered little hope. She had fought Marcus's controlling attitude because she knew David needed freedom to heal. She had brought joy and laughter back into a house that had been filled with sadness for too long. "I want to give you a raise," Marcus told Maria. "And a bonus for everything you've done for David." Maria shook her head. "I don't need more money, Mr. Thornfield. I need you to keep being the father David needs. That's worth more than any bonus you could give me." The breakthrough with David's toe movement had shown Marcus that healing could happen in unexpected ways and at unexpected times. But more importantly, it had shown him that his son was stronger and more resilient than Marcus had given him credit for. David had survived 8 months of despair and found reasons to hope again. He had made friends with other kids who had disabilities and learned that he was not alone in his struggles. Marcus started joining David for visits to the community center. He watched his son play wheelchair basketball and race other kids around the track. He met parents who had been dealing with disability for years and learned how they had built happy, successful lives. He saw teenagers with spinal cord injuries who were going to college and pursuing careers and dating and living independently. "These kids are incredible," Marcus told Sarah after his first visit to the community center. "They don't see themselves as victims. They see themselves as athletes and students and future leaders. David fits right in with them." Sarah smiled. She had been trying to tell Marcus this for months, but he had needed to see it for himself. Marcus also began to understand David's friendship with other kids who had disabilities. At first, Marcus had worried that these friendships would make David accept limitations instead of fighting for recovery. But he learned that the opposite was true. David's friends encouraged him to push himself and try new things. They celebrated his successes and supported him through setbacks. They treated him like a normal teenager who happened to use a wheelchair. One of David's new friends was a 15-year-old girl named Jessica, who had lost her leg in a car accident. Jessica was on her school swim team and was training for the Paralympics. She was also an honor student who wanted to be a marine biologist. When Marcus met Jessica, he was amazed by her confidence and ambition. "David talks about you all the time," Jessica told Marcus. "He says you're finally starting to get it." Marcus laughed. "Get what?" he asked. "That being disabled doesn't mean being broken," Jessica said. "David is the same awesome person he was before his accident. He just gets around differently now." These conversations changed how Marcus thought about success and failure. He had always measured success in terms of money and power and beating the competition, but David and his friends had taught Marcus that real success was about courage and kindness, and finding joy even during difficult times. By that measure, his son was more successful than most adults Marcus knew. Marcus started making changes in his business practices too. He began hiring people with disabilities for his companies. He made sure his buildings were accessible to everyone. He started donating money to organizations that helped kids with spinal cord injuries. But these changes felt different from his usual charitable giving. Before, Marcus had donated money to get tax breaks and positive publicity. Now he gave because he understood how much these organizations meant to families like his. The relationship between Marcus and David continued to grow stronger every day. They talked about David's school projects and his dreams for the future. They watched movies together and played video games that David could control with his hands. They went to restaurants and stores with Marcus pushing David's wheelchair and not caring who stared or asked questions. "I'm proud of you, son," Marcus told David during one of their evening conversations. "Not because you moved your toe, but because of who you are. You're braver than I ever was. You're kinder than I ever was. You're a better man than I was at your age." David smiled and hugged his father. "I learned from watching you, Dad. You never give up when something is important to you." Marcus realized that David was right. He had never given up when it came to building his business empire. He had worked 18 hours a day and fought through every obstacle to achieve his goals. Now he was applying that same determination to being a better father and husband. The difference was that this time, his efforts were making people happy instead of just making money. 6 months after the breakthrough with David's toe movement, Marcus looked at his life and barely recognized it. He still ran his business empire, but it no longer consumed every waking moment. 1 year after David moved his toe for the first time, Marcus stood in front of 200 people at a press conference in downtown Los Angeles. Reporters held cameras and microphones toward him. Business leaders sat in the front rows. Medical researchers filled the back of the room. Everyone wanted to know why one of the richest men in America was giving away $500 million. Today I am announcing the creation of the David Thornfield Foundation for Spinal Cord Research and Recovery, Marcus said into the microphones. His voice was strong and clear, but those who knew him well could hear the emotion behind his words. This foundation will fund research into new treatments for paralysis. But more importantly, it will help families learn that life after spinal cord injury can still be full of hope and possibility. Marcus looked out at the crowd and saw faces he recognized. Dr. Hamilton was there, the expensive specialist who had tried so many treatments on David. Dr. Peterson was there too, the physical therapist who had been working with David when he first moved his toe. Jessica was there, David's friend from the community center who was now training for the Paralympics. And in the front row, Marcus saw the two people who mattered most, David and Maria. David was sitting in his wheelchair wearing a suit and tie, looking proud and mature. He had grown taller over the past year, and his arms were strong from months of physical therapy and wheelchair sports. More importantly, his smile was back. The sad, angry boy who had refused to leave his room was gone. In his place was a confident teenager who wanted to change the world. Maria was sitting next to David, wearing a simple blue dress and crying happy tears. She had become much more than David's nurse over the past year. She was family now, the person who had saved them all when they needed saving most. Marcus had asked Maria to become the foundation's director of patient advocacy, and she had accepted with the condition that she could still work directly with kids like David. "My son David will tell you more about what this foundation means to our family," Marcus continued, gesturing for David to come to the podium. David rolled his wheelchair up the ramp that had been built especially for this event. The room was completely quiet as David adjusted the microphone to his height. "A year ago, I thought my life was over," David said into the microphone. His voice was clear and confident, but Marcus could remember when David had barely whispered because he was so sad. I thought being paralyzed meant I could never do anything important or meaningful again. I was wrong about that, and I was wrong about a lot of other things, too. David looked directly at his father as he spoke. I used to think my dad cared more about money than about me. I thought he was embarrassed by my wheelchair and disappointed that I wasn't the son he wanted anymore. I was wrong about that, too. My dad loves me exactly as I am, and he's taught me that being different doesn't mean being less than anyone else. Marcus felt tears starting to form in his eyes. He had not cried in public since he was a child, but his son's words were breaking down walls he had spent decades building. David continued speaking to the crowd, but his eyes stayed on Marcus. This foundation isn't just about finding cures for paralysis, David said. It's about helping families understand that people with disabilities can live amazing lives right now, today, while we're also working toward better treatments. I have friends who are going to college, starting businesses, getting married, and raising families. They do all of this from wheelchairs, and they're some of the happiest people I know. The applause was loud and long. David had spoken for only 3 minutes, but he had said everything that needed to be said. Marcus walked over to his son and put his hand on David's shoulder. I'm proud of you, he whispered, and David smiled the smile that had been missing for so many months after his accident. After the press conference, Marcus, David, and Maria went to lunch at a small restaurant near the community center, where David played basketball twice a week. It was not the kind of fancy place Marcus used to prefer for business meals. The tables were simple, the food was good but not expensive, and the atmosphere was warm and friendly. So what happens now? David asked as they waited for their food. Marcus looked at his son, really looked at him. David was almost 14 now, and he was becoming the kind of young man Marcus had always hoped he would raise. Kind, intelligent, determined, and full of dreams about making the world better. Now we get to work, Marcus said. The foundation will fund research at 10 major medical centers. We'll support families who can't afford the best care. We'll build accessible playgrounds and sports facilities. And we'll make sure every kid who has a spinal cord injury knows that their life is still full of possibilities. Maria smiled at both of them, and I get to keep working with kids like David, helping them find their strength and their hope. She had been offered jobs at major hospitals that would pay much more money, but she loved working with children and families. The foundation would allow her to help hundreds of kids instead of just one at a time. Over the following months, the David Thornfield Foundation became one of the most respected organizations in the field of spinal cord injury research and support. Marcus used his business skills to make sure every dollar was spent wisely and every program achieved real results. But he also used something he had learned from David and Maria. He made sure the foundation treated every family with love and respect, not just professional efficiency. David became the foundation's youngest ambassador, traveling to hospitals and community centers to talk with other kids who had recently been injured. He would tell them about the dark months after his accident when he thought his life was over. Then he would show them pictures of himself playing wheelchair basketball, giving speeches, and working on his environmental science projects for school. I'm not going to lie to you, David would tell the kids he visited. This is hard, really hard. There will be days when you want to give up, but there will also be days when you discover you're stronger than you ever thought possible. And there will be people like Maria, who believe in you even when you don't believe in yourself. Marcus would often watch these conversations from across the room, amazed by his son's wisdom and compassion. David had learned to turn his pain into purpose, his struggle into strength. These were lessons Marcus had never learned in all his years of building his business empire. The foundation's research programs began showing promising results within the first year. New treatments were being developed that could help people regain some feeling and movement after spinal cord injuries. Better wheelchairs and mobility devices were being designed. Support programs were helping families cope with the emotional challenges of disability. But Marcus was most proud of the foundation's community programs. They built accessible playgrounds in low-income neighborhoods. They started adaptive sports leagues for kids who couldn't afford expensive equipment. They created support groups for parents who were struggling with their children's disabilities. These programs didn't make headlines or win awards, but they changed lives every day. Marcus also made major changes to his business empire. Thornfield Industries became a leader in accessible design, making sure all their hotels and buildings could be used by people with disabilities. Marcus hired dozens of employees who had various disabilities, discovering that they often brought unique perspectives and problem-solving skills to their jobs. The Tokyo deal that had been so important on the day of David's accident was eventually completed, but Marcus barely noticed. The German hotel chain was successfully purchased, but the victory felt hollow compared to watching David score a goal in wheelchair basketball. The stock prices continued to climb, but Marcus cared more about David's grades in environmental science class. "You've changed," Sarah told Marcus one evening as they watched David practice guitar with Maria. David was learning to play songs for the younger kids at the community center. His music brought smiles to faces that had been marked by trauma and loss. "I had to change," Marcus replied, taking Sarah's hand. "I was so busy building an empire that I almost lost my kingdom." Sarah understood what he meant. Their family had been falling apart even before David's accident. Marcus's obsession with work had created distance between all of them. But crisis had brought them closer together than they had ever been. 2 years after the foundation was established, David surprised everyone by announcing his plans for the future. "I want to study environmental engineering in college," he told his parents, "and I want to specialize in making buildings more energy efficient and accessible. I think I can help solve climate change and disability issues at the same time." Marcus was amazed by his son's vision and ambition. David was not just thinking about his own future. He was planning to spend his life helping others. "I'll support whatever you want to do," Marcus promised. "But you know you don't have to prove anything to anyone. You're already extraordinary." David smiled at his father. "I learned from watching you, Dad. You taught me that if something is important enough, you work as hard as you can to make it happen. The environment is important to me. Helping other kids with disabilities is important to me, so that's what I'm going to work hard on."